What is the number one misconception that you run into that people have about what you do?
The number one is really, it has to do with fees.
What sorts of things can you help people with?
A lot of it's really understanding, like, who can I connect this person to that can help give them the best value for their life situation.
How do you help people be proactive with their money and get them from point A to point B?
The question is, what are the decisions you have to make today to be able to have that thing that you want?
Yehen Dhanawansa, it was such a pleasure to be able to have you on the Best of White Rock for a variety of reasons. And I want to be candid, actually. There was a story that you and you had shared with me a couple of weeks ago, and it just clicked for me that I'm like, I've got to see if I can get Yehen onto the show, because the way that you framed it, it wasn't about what you did, it was about the why you did it.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought that was such an incredible thing to share with people, because this show is about having the best of the best and introducing them to the community. And that's our goal. We want to make sure that we scream the best people's names from the mountaintops, because people deserve to work with the best and to have the best.
Absolutely.
So what I would love for you to do is to let everybody know who you are, what you do, and we'll get into some fun conversation from there.
Yeah, so my name's Yehen Dhanawansa.
I said it right.
Yeah,
Awesome.
You said it perfectly. So
Good.
It's a Sri Lankan name, so I think Sri Lankans are famous for having really long names.
They are, yes.
So luckily my first name's not too long. My last name is a bit longer. But yeah, long story short, I work in the financial industry. I'm a financial advisor, financial planner. I've been doing this for almost 15 years.
Wow.
It's not what I took in school originally. I wanted to get into business. I had gone to UBC and actually left that early, and then I ended up just starting businesses. And I think in my late teens, early 20s, I was running multiple businesses. I was very interested in just having my own freedom, my own flexibility. The thought process of just coming into an office and doing that for 40 or 50 years, it didn't really appeal to me. So I spent a lot of time learning. I spent a lot of time just trying different things. I used to read a lot of books. My claim to fame was I read a book a week for 10 years.
Wow.
So from there, I learned a lot about just the world, about businesses, how things work, and eventually I started doing a little bit of investing. I was always very curious in businesses and like what makes money flow, essentially. And through there, I started investing. A few of my friends got wind of it. And long story short, eventually I ended up getting recruited by one of the banks. And I ended up working at a bank for about 7 years, and then ended up being one of the top advisors in Western Canada, essentially. And through that, it was really my experience that brought me to there with all the things that I did in business, and eventually wanted to go kind of on my own. So now I work with Edward Jones. I work as a financial planner with Edward Jones, and I have an office that is basically just myself and the admin, and I work with clients that my intention is to work with clients that I'll work with pretty much for their whole lives, and eventually work with that client, build them up, and hopefully help them pass on wealth to their future family.
What a neat idea that,
Yeah.
the whole idea of clients for life, and
Yeah.
that you're going to meet them at whatever point in their journey they're at, but you're also going to be there for them when they get to benefit or reap the rewards of all the the help that you've guided them along throughout the years.
It's absolutely one of the things that I've really experienced in this industry is it's very, very easy for somebody to think they're getting advice. I always compare it to like if you want to learn how to be healthy and you go to Google and you type in how do you be healthy, or how do I become more healthy, there's a there's a surplus in information. There's just endless information, and it's the same with money. If you know go to Google and you type in how to be rich, you're going to get everything. So the question ends up being how does somebody really navigate life? You know, when you know grow up in high school and then you're not really given a lot of training on navigating life. Then you go into university, you get a job, you study for 4 years, sometimes longer, and then now you have a job and a family, and now what do? You get this paycheck, and most people today, like you have a certain amount of month, and there's a certain amount of money, and what do you do with that, and how do you make it work? How do you get to the point where you're now able to provide for your family, or able to now do the things that you want to do with money, and eventually get to a point where you're retiring, and how do you make it so you're not paying too much taxes? How do you make it so that you can actually be comfortable in the things that you want to do? And to now do that with somebody, their whole lives, you get to see lives change.
Why don't we get taught about money in school? Why is that something that people are so foreign to what to do with money, or even a healthy respect for money? And we're not in a world anymore where you're going to save your way to retirement.
Mm-hmm.
You're not going to save it. You have to be proactive about it. You have to put your money to work for you. Why don't we get taught that in school?
It's a really interesting question, and I've thought about this a lot myself. And to be honest, the school curriculum is designed for a few things. It's essentially really there to teach you. It's essentially designed to teach you how to have a job, and so things like your health, things like you're managing your finances. It's one of those things that's very personal, and you almost have to find out yourself. So a lot of people will go to school, they'll come out of school, and they'll essentially work their entire lives in a job that the whole purpose of that job is really for them to make money and provide for their family. And then they'll do that, but they won't even know what to do with their money. So people are often in the situation where they're just kind of doing what they heard from a friend, or what they read on the internet, or maybe they saw a magazine, or they were at a dinner and they heard somebody do something, and now they kind of just try that. So oftentimes the reason of why we're not taught that, I don't know. I wish we were taught it more, but it's one of those things where you really have to make your own effort to go and do that.
You do, and you use the word curious a few times, and you're obviously a very curious person, based on the amount of books that you've read and your experience leading you up to where you are today. When people aren't curious about money, that's seemingly where they likely start to struggle, because even being curious about money is probably that that initial phone call for you that says, hey, I've got to admit, I don't know what I should know to get me down the path to where I want to be, and I need help, right?
Mm-hmm.
And there's so many, speaking of books, like there's so many books. I mean, you can replace the titles of them, whether it's Rich Dad, Poor Dad, or, geez, I got 50 on my shelf I'm trying to think of, and they all basically say the same thing about, like pay yourself first and then put your money to work for
Mm-hmm.
you, right? But you don't get taught that. And so this is why what you do exists, and this is why it's exciting for people to be exposed to this sort of thing, to know that the idea that you're going to save your way to retirement is not something that's going to happen anymore. Just things are too expensive now. It's too difficult.
Mm-hmm.
Unless you're making a boatload of money, which I hope everybody is, but unless you're making a boatload of money, it's not the truth, right?
Yeah.
So you have to be proactive about it, and that's where people like you come in. So how do you help people be proactive with their money and get them from point A to point B being whatever it might be for them?
Right. So the interesting thing is, like, even when you're talking about a boatload of money, the interesting thing is really understanding it's not even about the amount of money somebody makes, it's about the habits that they have. And I've seen people that make a boatload of money that are in a worse position in their 50s and 60s than somebody that makes, maybe 50,000 or 60,000 that has, a very average job. So the interesting thing about money is it's a very personalized thing, just like health and fitness, for example. If you give a do-all recipe to one person, that recipe is not necessarily going to work for the next person. Same with real estate. A house that one person likes isn't necessarily going to be a house that another person likes. Same as that. So, really, my job is to take the experience and the understanding and everything that I've learned through years of doing this, and to now be able to help people and help them navigate decisions and help them form the correct habits. More than just the simple, investing and what's your return. It's understanding the habits that they do day in, day out that are going to help them to now build wealth to be able to provide for their family. Because in the end, when we look at Vancouver, the house prices in Vancouver have gone up tremendously over the last 20 years or so. And most people in Vancouver, they're able to retire today not because they made good decisions, but because their house prices went up significantly, and they're now able to pull equity out of that. But if the house prices had remained the same, or if they had only doubled, like if people's houses today, if you're buying a house today in Vancouver and it was only 400,000 or 500,000, you'd be in a situation today where most people don't have any money saved up, or it's very minimal. And that was essentially the saving grace for people. The question ends up being, for the next 20 years, are we expecting the house prices to, again, 5, 6, or 7-fold? And is that what's going to save people? Or are people going to have to make better decisions, oftentimes better decisions than they're even used to from seeing their friends and family?
Yeah, and you bring up a good point. I mean, that's in my real estate business. I get to ask that question. The famous question is like, what's going to happen tomorrow, right? What's happening with house prices? Where are they going to go? Where what? And my comment back to everybody is, I can only tell you where we are today and help you make good decisions based on today. And part of those good decisions is making sure that not only are you going to love the home that you buy, but also financially, you're not going to be someone calling me back in 3 years because you're saying I can't afford to stay here because I've made, or I can't afford to finish it, or I can't, or furnish it rather, or I can't afford to heat it because I made a mistake, right?
Mm-hmm.
I overspent. I wasn't thinking long term, and
Mm-hmm.
you use the word habits, helping people correct their habits, and and sometimes maybe it's not what you do, or maybe it's something that you don't do.
Mm-hmm.
How do you go through that with people, and how do you help them recognize kind of what is maybe a destructive habit that's silently destroying their wealth,
Mm-hmm.
or in the other term, well, let's try a different direction to help you be more successful by doing this instead of this. Like, how
Mm-hmm.
do you identify those?
The interesting thing is a lot of people I meet today that have not worked with an advisor. There's very few people I've met in even 15 years, and this includes people that are supposed to be very good with money, like even portfolio managers, even CFOs. The thing is, a lot of people don't really realize what it takes to build actual wealth and what it takes to actually build stability with finances. And a lot of people are so deep in a lack of understanding that they don't even know what they don't know. So in a sense, a lot of people, what they do is they try to save up a little bit. They try to, invest their money. They try to get a certain return. And they're doing all these things, whether it's, saving or investing, or maybe they're trying to be good with their spending per se. But in a sense, a lot of it is really, it's developing those habits every day and understanding, okay, if there's a certain goal or a certain target you want to reach, you really need to work backwards from that. If there's a certain level of a retirement you want, or if there's a certain, house you want to buy, or if there's, you want to send your kids to school, 15 years from now, the question is, what are the decisions you have to make today to be able to now, you know, at the end result, be able to have that thing that you want. So in a sense, my job is really, it's very personalized in a sense that what I do for one person is probably not going to work for the next person. And so a lot of what I do is really sitting down with individuals and get to know them extremely well so that in the end, the knowledge I have and the understanding of their situation I have can translate now into something tangible 10 or 15 years, 20 years down the road.
Is money really taboo for people when they come see you? Because it's taboo amongst family members. It's taboo amongst friends. Nobody asks their friend. Actually, mine do. But like,
Hmm.
I know, like, most people don't just ask their friends, like, how much do you make? How much do
Hmm.
you have saved? What's your plan for retirement?
Hmm.
Do you find it's like that when people come and sit down with you, or are they relatively open and they're ready to kind of say, look, I've got a problem and I need a solution?
Most people have a bit of a misunderstanding. So a lot of people, especially in the last few years, with the rise of retail investing, a lot of people think investing is just about buying a stock and hoping the stock's going to go up, and just you're afraid the stock's going to go down, you're going to lose money. So in a sense, when people come to talk to me, there's typically a couple categories. There's people that admit that they don't know anything. They're just like, hey, you help me with the situation. And then there's people that often think they've done some investing. They've maybe gone to a bank and they put some money in mutual funds or a GIC, something like that. And in a sense, they've had a bit of an experience with money, but really, when it comes to actually putting everything together in terms of the question you ask people is, okay, at 65 or whenever you're going to retire, if you keep doing what you're doing, how much money are you going to have in retirement? And how much money do you need to have in retirement to have the lifestyle you want?
That's probably incredibly sobering.
Right.
Yeah.
And so most people have not even thought about that question. So realistically, if somebody has, they're saving up, even let's say somebody's saving $1,000 a month, which is a lot. The question ends up being, what kind of lifestyle is that going to translate to 30 years from now? And if what your experience of investing is, hey, I bought some stocks, or I bought this ETF and whatnot, a lot of times you might be able to project a bit of a return, and you might be able to project, say, okay, I'll have X and X dollars, but then also, like, how much are you going to be able to draw from that? How are you going to be able to draw from that in the most tax efficient manner? How is it going to translate to your kids in terms of, if they want to go to school, or if you have some sort of an emergency situation with your family, now you have to pull from retirement, or you have to pull equity at your house. There's so many different hurdles that people have to navigate in life. We spend probably, of our waking hours, we probably spend more than half that time at work making money to be able to provide a life. Yet to even, sit down with somebody that's going to help guide us and make that input of effort more efficient to be able to provide a life, oftentimes it's almost a scary decision to go try and sit down with an advisor to make those changes. And then a lot of times, oftentimes, especially in today's era, there's 90% of people do not have an advisor. The other 10% of people that have an advisor probably don't have a good advisor. They either work with somebody at a bank that put their money in mutual funds and maybe haven't talked to them for several years, or they've met somebody that sold them something, and there's not really any sort of planning going on. So they're doing some investing, but in terms of the actual question of what is that actual investing tangibly going to translate into, that's the question. Probably less than 5% of people actually understand the answer to that question.
Yeah, it's really interesting, and that's where having that relationship and your point about being with people as they go through their journey financially, that really makes that difference.
Mm-hmm.
What if I was coming into you today? What sorts of things can you help people with? Like, so what different avenues do you have in your utility belt, so to speak,
Mm-hmm.
to help people better prepare for their financial futures? So, like, what are some pathways that people have?
Well, one of the interesting thing with working with a company like Edward Jones, for example, and a lot of the financial firms that deal with wealth planning, is there's no way for me to know everything. When it comes to things like tax laws, estate thing, there's so much information out there. So really my job is to have that relationship with the person I'm working with, and get to know that person very well. And I can help them with a lot of the the simpler stuff like RSPs and saving habits and TFSAs, investing. But then a lot of it's really understanding, like, who can I connect this person to that can help give them the best value for their life situation, right? So if somebody needs to do a will, if somebody needs to do estate planning, if somebody needs to do tax planning, you start off in your 20s, and you're just kind of saving up a little bit of money every month, or maybe you have a job and you're building up your savings. But then as you start to have a family, as you start to have a house, and things become more complicated, there's really anything to do with money is really my job to be able to now help translate that into who can I connect this person to help them get the best value for whatever they have.
Yeah, I love that you said that. I remember being, I'm in a coaching organization for real estate that I've been in since I started. It's like
Hmm.
almost 20 years now. And they made us do this wheel. And the purpose of doing the wheel, you've seen like the wheels of life, like, you know, how's your physical and your romantic and your financial health and all that sort of stuff. But this one was about the people in your circle that you go to for trusted information,
Hmm.
for financial, as an example, you know, that
Hmm.
were you, real estate would be us, doctor for health. Like, do you
Hmm.
have your own personal doctor? There's so many, like your accountant, as an example, a CPA. People mistake their CPAs for financial planners.
Hmm.
Totally different and big
It's,
mistake.
it's completely different. Yeah.
Totally different, right? So, but who is this, you know, artillery of people that you have at your disposal where they are subject matter experts and they are able to help you know more than you have the ability to know? You can't chat GPT your way to all this stuff,
Hmm.
right? So it was a really neat exercise because you're going through this and you're saying, well, look, I have an opening in this area because I don't have anybody that's a financial expert that can help guide me for retirement. You know, I'm only X amount years old. I'm not worried about it. Well, the
Hmm.
number one thing that you'll hear is you know, what is it, the seventh wonder of the world? Is it compounding?
Yeah.
Is it,
Compound
yeah,
interest.
right?
Yeah.
So
Eighth wonder. Yeah.
I mean, if anything, start early, right? But
Yeah.
to have people that you can trust, that you can rely on to help you get to where you want to go, whatever that might be,
Hmm.
is just such a value. So
Yeah.
now I'm curious, what for your business, there's probably misconceptions out there.
Hmm.
What is the number one misconception that you run into that people have about what you do?
There's probably two. The
Okay.
the number one is really it has to do with fees, and you see this a lot on whether it's Instagram or you see it on different social media, and they basically look at, okay, if you work with an advisor, how much fees are you going to pay in your lifetime? So they show you an investment that's, you know, giving you 7%, and they say, okay, well, if that investment did 6%, that, you know, this would be the difference in what you'd make. The truth is that this comes from a couple things. So number one, like there's a lot of advisors out there that will simply take a client's money, or even the banks, for example, will take a client's money and just throw it into an investment, and often very rarely talk to that client. And so at that point, really, only value you're getting is that, you know, the investments are essentially assigned to that person, but there's really no advice. So in a sense, like you're paying this money, but then, you know, you might as well just go do it yourself, because you'll pretty much make the same thing, and you'll probably make more rather than paying some guy to just supposedly invest your money.
Right.
The real thing to understand is, if you have a good advisor that's helping you to plan, that's helping you to do tax planning, if that's helping you to now structure investments properly, that's making sure you're in the right investments. How many times have you heard somebody say they lost money in stock? Like, how many times have you heard somebody say they bought this investment and it tanked, and they so in a sense, if somebody's helping you to do all this stuff, the 1% or so, the, you know, 1 or 2% that gets charged by an advisor, you're making that money back, and oftentimes you'll make back, you know, significantly higher, and you'll prevent yourself from making mistakes that could that could completely change your life.
Yeah. Yeah.
And if you get caught up, like if you're in your 50s and 60s, and you do something that, you know, one mistake that, you know, you invest in the wrong stock or the wrong thing, if you lose half your investment portfolio in your 50s, for example, like your whole retirement is now significantly changed. And then the second one is really the difference between investing and planning. It's really, when people typically talk to an advisor, oftentimes we're very geared to talk about returns. And we're really geared to say, okay, like I did this thing and it got 8%, and, you know, if this person gets me 9%, then it's better.
It's like mortgage rates. When we see people on the real estate side and they speak to our mortgage partners, they just hear like, I can save a quarter point, and
Yeah,
they will sign the most devastating mortgage contract because they
yeah.
don't understand what they're doing.
It's exactly what it is,
Yeah.
right? So, in a sense, like if somebody is planning to move in 3 years, for example, or if they're in a situation where they might move, to put them into a 5-year fixed mortgage, they're going to end up paying more than the, you know, 20 basis points, or you know, 0.5%, or whatever the difference in the mortgage several years down the road. So in the same way, if all I'm doing is taking somebody's money and throwing it into investment and never talking to them again, that's just investing. But if I'm helping them to now make decisions, to help them save, to help them have better habits, to help them structure their investments to, save their taxes. Even just little bits of advice, even if I, give them one small piece of advice once a year, over the course of their lifetime, that advice is going to compound. And even just having that one person to, talk to and to direct them in the right ideas, they're going to make significantly, they're going to be in a significantly better position than if they just kind of thrown some money in an account and put in an ETF and waited around for 30 years. And oftentimes, there's very few people that are going to actually invest and then follow the correct habits for 20 or 30 years. Right? Most people are going to put some money in, they're going to, build it up a bit, then they're going to go buy something, and then they're going to, there's so many bad decisions they're going to make over 40 and 50 years of their lifetime. And to have somebody in their life that's going to help them with those decisions, and when you're coming to retirement, in a sense, if you hadn't planned that 5 or 10 or 15 or 20 years before, oftentimes you're just kind of living by the seat of your pants, and you haven't made good decisions. So now you're pretty much at the mercy of whatever happened to your house, whatever sort of government benefits you might get. And oftentimes what we see in Vancouver now is essentially the result of that. It's where people are doing okay now because their house prices went up. But if that had not happened, the question is, where would most people be today?
Yeah, it's an interesting dichotomy between planning and investing. It's a neat way to kind of explain it and look at it for people. One of the reasons I was excited to have you on here is you were telling me a story, and we don't need to get into the how of the story, but we'll get into the the theme of it more so, I would say. But it was about a lady, and this was back in your banking days, and you gave this lady some advice that was against your interest, was against the bank's interest at the time, who shall remain nameless, and but it was in her interest. And that really, really struck me as something special. And it was related to her mortgage, and mortgages, there's big money involved in mortgages. There's even bigger money involved when you want to terminate or cancel a mortgage. And this is where she was finding herself in this situation. And you gave her some insider baseball on how she could be much more financially well off than she would have been had she have gone the route without. Why did you do that?
It's one of those things, like when you have a career and you get to the point, I was one of the top guys essentially in Western Canada with what I did. And I got to a point eventually where, when you're a kid and you're in high school, I guess, and you're in university and you want to be successful and you want to do stuff, you get to a point eventually where you get to that point of success and you realize at that point now, what you have, you're able to help other people, right? So what I'd seen in my banking days, where I worked with people that they could walk into almost any place and get excellent service. If you come into a bank and you have $5 million saved up, you'll get tremendous service. But the average person today that is a family, they're trying to provide for their kids, they're trying to save up for a vacation. Most people they really don't know what is the best decision oftentimes. And so to be able to now help people, to be able to guide people, there's nothing that stops me from doing that other than just simply, trying to be maybe some big shot at the bank or trying to help make the bank more money. In the end, they're going to be fine. Their profits are good. So if I'm able to help, a family, if I'm able to help, a person be better off, there's nothing that's going to, prevent me from doing that. And I enjoy it. So.
Yeah. Well, it was such a great story. And I want to be clear, you didn't do anything wrong. You were playing well within the lines, but you were helping somebody who didn't understand the lines better understand them so they could be more successful. And I just thought it was such a neat story because you're in a business where it's not a transactional business, right? Like people come to you, and as you said, they're kind of like with you for life. And to be able to gain that is such a high level of trust and a high level of respect and regard that you both have to mutually share for each other. Otherwise, you never get put in that position in the first place.
Yeah.
And I reflect back on, we think about this with our real estate business all the time. If you want people to talk about you, you have to give them something to talk about. And I just thinking about this lady who got this advice from you and coming out of that conversation, just going, wow, the value that I just got out of that. And had I had tried to do it on my own, or thought I knew more than anybody else, or threw it into Chat GPT, or listened to my parents who have bought 2 homes in 50 years, like whatever that, that inner conversation might have been, or outer conversation might have been, had she have not came to you, she would be out a lot of money right now.
It was a really interesting situation when I think back, because I think in the end, she actually came to me for advice on essentially how to pay for this money that she was going to have to pay for.
Oh, okay.
And I ended up showing her how to do it without paying any money at all, or very minimally, right? So it's one of those things where, in the job I do, like what I do, it's become to a point now for me, it's more than just a career. I enjoy it, and I'm not here to work with anybody. I'm really here to work with selective people that we kind of both choose to work with each other. And really, in the end, if you think about it, these people become your friends for life. And you think about, how would you treat your family? How would you treat your brother? If there was any way that you knew you could give your brother an advantage with something, you would do that. And so in a sense, like, this is what I do now. I've worked with people that I felt have had tremendous advantages in life. And for me to now come here and just work with the community, and to work with people, just the average people, it's really it's what I've wanted to do my whole life.
Yeah.
So yeah,
it's a neat story, and then I really appreciate it for you to join us on the Best of White Rock, and I want to make sure that we're able to scream your name from the mountaintops as well. So how do people find you if they want to get in touch with you and learn more about how you can help them?
My office is you can call me, my cell number my office number is 604-594-4939. I have a pretty unique name, so it's not really
which we will make sure spelt very accurately in the bottom, as well as a link to your email and that sort of stuff.
Really, for me, it's really just shoot me an email or shoot me a call, and I love to chat with people, even if it's just some tips or some advice. I give free advice to people, so I really love to help people be better off. Whether it's even just a chat, whether it's giving them some tips on whatever they're trying to do. So it's really become a passion for me.
Well, you're a good guy, and I know you're a big resource to the people that you serve. So I want to thank you very much for being on the Best of White Rock. I'm going to encourage everybody to reach out and see what you can do to help them.
Great. Thank you so much. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Yeah, my pleasure. Cheers.